Welcome to everybody who's joining us today for our Early Career Professionals panel session talking about commercial careers in life sciences. My name's Catherine Walk. Apologies that you can't see me today. Unfortunately, I'm having some technological issues. At this stage, I'd like to pass over to Mark, who's an organiser from ELRIG and the UCP.
Thank you very much, Catherine. Thank you for the introduction. Yeah, and welcome everybody. I can see we still got people coming through, but thank you for giving up some of your lunchtime for this. My name's Mark Suave. I'm by my day job, I'm a senior scientist at a company called OMAS Therapeutics, but I'm also the chair of the Early Career Professional Work Group at ELRIG. And welcome to this Beyond the Lab webinar series, the first one of this for this year, all about commercial careers, as he said, chaired by the very wonderful and capable Catherine Moore. So a little bit of background just about ELRIG. If this is your first ELRIG event, we're a not-for-profit organization. We bring in together a wide range of scientists. You can see there are over 22,000 scientists from across industry, academia, and life sciences. We work on a program that's free to attend, such as this this webinar, sorry, and it's all supported by our vendor sponsors and exhibitors as well. Our community represents a wide spectrum of the life science industry. You can see the majority are in that industry. We have quite a number of members in academia, and the remainder of these roles support the life sciences. We have a thriving early career professional community, of which hopefully the majority of you would define as in your early career. And we are predominantly based in the UK, but are branching out as well into other regions as well. You can see the statistics there. Really, we represent a dynamic mix of researchers and people involved in obtaining the research and in the aspects of drug discovery, and we're really all about empowering better science and better communication across the industry. We're driven by a series of values and purpose, which I won't go through in detail, but you can read on the screen there, and we hold these near and dear to any event and any activity that ELRIG does. Finally, I should say that this is not the only thing that ELRIG is doing by any stretch of the imagination. We have a number of events across the year. I've just flagged up the calendar for 2024. You can see we're right at the beginning in February here. We have in-person conferences such as Research and Innovation in Manchester in March. We have other forums and a shorter kind of one-day events. We have other careers webinars as well. So if you find this one intriguing and interesting, please come along to other ones as well, dotted around the year. And I would encourage you to go onto the website at elrig.org and find all the information there. Just finally, before I hand back over to Catherine, just a little bit of housekeeping from a technical point of view. This is a panel session, so we do encourage you to ask questions. Now, you'll note that Zoom has a Q&A section in there. Not the chat, but if you use the Q&A, the questions and answers, to pose your questions, they will then be visible to all the panelists and to Catherine as well. And you can also vote for other questions that you will have seen that you might want to have answered yourself that somebody else has asked. So I strongly encourage, as the session goes along, ask as many questions as you like on there. We'll be able to capture them, and any unanswered questions as well, we can then pose to the panelists after the event as well. So without further ado, Catherine, I'll hand back over to you.
Okay, thanks very much, Mark. And again, apologies everybody that you're not able to see me today. It's a pleasure to be supporting this event. This event actually is being very kindly sponsored by SRG, whose logo you can see on Mark's background alongside ELRIG. So I'd like to start by introducing Philippa, who's representing SRG, to tell us a little bit about themselves as a sponsor today. Philippa, are you able to join?
Yeah, can you see me okay? Ah, there I am.
Yes,
so yes, we're absolutely thrilled to be sponsoring this event today. So I just wanted to very briefly tell you a little bit about SRG and a little bit about my role. So for those of you who don't know, SRG is a scientific recruitment group. We've been around now for over 30 years, and we supply talent across science, clinical and engineering. We are the biggest provider of life science talent in the UK, and we work with candidates from very early stage right through to C-suite. Whilst a lot of the jobs that we do recruit for are laboratory based, we also have a huge demand to place candidates in non-lab based or commercial roles. And we tend to work with candidates in two ways. Either they're in education already and they've decided they don't want to work in the lab and they want to be more commercially focused, or perhaps they're in the lab and they've decided it's time to hang up their lab coat. The way in which we can support candidates in the variety of ways: we can provide career guidance, we can help you with your CVs, we can coach you through the interviews, but ultimately we can place you in a role that's a really good fit for your skills and experience. And then finally, I just wanted to very briefly tell you a little bit about myself. So I've worked for SRG now for 20 years. I did biomedical sciences at university, got to year 2. I did complete my degree, but got to year 2, and it was very clear to me that I didn't want to work in the lab. I wanted to be customer facing. I wanted to work more with people. So I was very fortunate to start working for SRG. I did fall into recruitment, but I've had a very, very, sort of happy career so far with SRG. And now I work in our business development team. So I work mainly with startups and growing biotechs, very customer facing, but I still wanted to be part of that scientific community. And then just really a parting comment for me as we go into the webinar. One of the key reflections for me is that certainly when I was at university, there wasn't very clear career guidance on commercial roles. If you did a degree or a PhD in science, you were destined for the lab. So I think I'm really excited to be involved in this webinar today, because there's so many great opportunities for commercial career pathways, and hopefully our audience will get lots of useful tips and advice today. But very happy to sponsor the event, and I'll hand you back over to Catherine.
Fantastic, Philippa. You can't see me, but I've got a big smile on my face because yours is definitely a commercial role as well, and I'm sure your scientific knowledge is of massive help to your clients when you're looking to place people within this sector. I can imagine it's very important.
Yeah, absolutely. I think having that scientific background not only gives you the credibility, but I think you're genuinely interested in what it is that you're doing day to day. So absolutely, I think that is a really important attribute.
Yeah, no, absolutely wonderful. Well, thank you. We will be inviting you back on to the general panel conversation later on. I'm sure you'll have insights to share on some of those questions and some of the questions that are coming in. I can already see questions coming in, so we'll probably come back to these a bit later on as we go through. What I'd like to do, we talked a little bit in the build up to this about the sort of themes we were going to cover. I'll be speaking to each of our panelists individually, learning a little bit about their roles and what brought them there and key aspects of that. All of our panelists as well have shared some questionnaires that we pose with them around their routes into the roles as well. So hopefully we'll be able to share those in some format with everybody who's participating today to give you some sort of follow-up on the specific areas. Before I kick off and talk to our panelists, I just wanted to share a little bit about myself. I'm currently in a managing director's position within my organisation, and I've had 20 years in the sort of commercial role outside of science, and I've held a number of different commercial type roles in my development path. So I guess I'm testament to the pathway that you can take in this sort of career. But I'm really pleased that the panelists we've got on today represent such a wide range of job options, really, for people that are starting out and looking into new areas. So without ado, I would like to introduce Joel Cresser-Brown. If you can come on screen, Joel, that would be great. What would be a fantastic start, Joel, is if you could maybe share an explanation of your role today, talk a little bit about yourself and the route that you took to get into your field, that would be wonderful. Thanks, Joel.
Thanks, Catherine. Thank you for having me. So, hello everyone, I'm Joel Cress-Brown. I'm a product manager in the innovation team at Topcris Bioscience, or Biotechne, as you might be familiar with as the brand. So my role involves the identification of new products, new tools and technologies to commercialize through the Biotechne brand. So we have a chemistry facility based over near Bristol in the UK, where we synthesize new reagents and new tools that can be used for life science research that some of you may be using in the lab already. So my role is about looking at emerging techniques, emerging trends, looking at what's next, looking at what researchers need in the lab, what problems we can solve with new technologies and new products and new reagents that will enable you to further your research. So my transition into this role, so I did a PhD in chemical biology. During that role, it was hugely multidisciplinary. I really enjoyed learning about new technologies and learning about any technique I could get my hands on and applying it in new ways in the lab. I then moved on to a short postdoc, and during that time, I kind of had a growing realization that I wanted to do something a bit more applied, where I could still use my scientific knowledge, but in a more focused way to solve some real life problems that have kind of industry relevance. So that led me down into the product management route. So the role is kind of split between having a good, solid scientific understanding. We have some chemists within our actual product management team. And then the other half is kind of more commercial focus. So looking at what the markets need, being able to support our sales team with selling the new products and new technologies, support our marketing team with making sure the messaging is correct. So we really follow the commercialization process from ideation all the way through to launch and beyond. So it's quite a broad role, but one that's really benefited from having the scientific background and then learning more of the commercial aspects a bit later on in the role.
Is there anything that you saw as really a challenge to you when you first set out in this role, based on where you come from before, Joel? Would you like to share that?
Yeah, so I guess a lot of scientists will have been in the lab, and fortunately, when I started at Topcris or Biotechne, there was a kind of general understanding that there were probably going to be very few people with the desired experience to start in a later role. So there were kind of entry-level positions within product management that allowed us to apply the scientific knowledge and learn more of the commercial aspects along the way, and then pick up some training. So I've done some product management training, project management training in ISO 9001, and other things like this. So that's kind of helped build some of the additional skills beyond what you would have learned in the lab and some of the soft skills there. So learning some of the additional commercial things later on, really, it was challenging at first, but it was helped by the company supporting the growth and putting in place some training and courses and such. So those challenges were overcome generally.
Yeah, well, that's great to hear. You've already sort of talked a lot about some of the drivers that took you outside of the lab. What would you say was the most critical thing that made you think, I need to be doing something outside of a lab environment? What was the big push for you?
I still enjoy some time in the lab, but I guess the natural progression is away from that, and being able to. I really enjoyed the kind of collaboration aspect of meeting new collaborators across the globe. So there's an element of international travel in my role, and part of that will be setting up new collaborations with companies and academics to start new projects, to develop new technologies that we can ultimately patent or launch as products. And that's very hard to do from within a lab. So I think a huge part of the networking really benefits from being outside of the lab from that point. And I really enjoyed the kind of networking aspect and being able to travel and go and meet new people and speak to new scientists out in the field. So an element of that was, I guess part of the travel as well was, is a key part of our role as well. Oh, I think you're on mute, Catherine.
Sorry, I was just saying there, that's really great insight, Joel. For the people listening, it might be nice to understand what a typical day might look like for you in this kind of role.
Yeah, sure. So there's a lot of different activities going on. We have a number of internal research projects here. So part of that will be involved in the kind of ongoing research projects. I'm industrial supervisor for PhD students, so we'll be going out to visit some of those. We attend conferences and seminars and many of the great LRIG events, of course. So the days really varied. Part of the role is also doing some licensing, so there's some dealing with tech transfer offices and drafting licenses and agreements and such. So it's a hugely varied role. It's also very key to be up to date with the scientific literature in our role. So we also have to keep up to date with various journals and new trends and research techniques. So there's still an element of being sharp and up to date on what's going on in the life sciences fields in general. So we don't have a standard day in product management. Every day is different, and you go in one day thinking it's going to be a certain day, and it ends up being completely different. But that's great, and it keeps it interesting.
So we've actually had a specific question coming for you, Joel, that I'll go to now. Some of the other questions we'll go to with our panelists later on. But quick question for Joel. What steps can I take while working in my current lab-based role to prepare myself for moving into a career in project management or product management? Is there anything I can do now to set myself apart from the other applications? This might be something we'll come back to as well with the other candidates, but what are your thoughts, Joel, on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you, Matthew. I guess there are a number of courses you could take, to kind of introductions to product management, introductions to project management, to learn some of the kind of frameworks for how some of these roles work. I would also advise speaking to some product managers, learning about, there's many different flavors of product management, so learning about the different ways you can go with it and which parts of it appeals to you more. So I think those would be the key ones. Maybe look at some kind of courses or doing some reading. You know, there's plenty of resources out there on the internet, or maybe some books, just to kind of flesh out your knowledge and your understanding of how product management and project management roles are set out. And then, yeah, some experience in talking to some people who can tell you that all the things they love and hate about the role. So I think, yeah, that would be my advice.
Yeah, no, definitely getting those shared experiences and that kind of thing would be very useful. We also had another, one of the anonymous attendees mentioned here, they're quite interested, out of all the roles, why product management and nothing else? You know, why that one specifically in terms of a commercial role that you thought to go into?
There were many
parts. What do you like best about it, I guess?
Difficult question, because I've only worked in product management, but there's a kind of it's a very multidisciplinary role in the sense that we also interact with pretty much every department in the company, which I really like. So we interact heavily with the chemistry team here, marketing, supply chain, the sales team. So in terms of a role, you get to interact with pretty much everyone in the company, which I really like. So that suits me very well. So I have only worked in product management in this company, but I wouldn't look to move elsewhere. I really enjoy it.
Yeah, a lot of product managers also get quite involved in the development side, whether it's with engineers in companies making equipment, or it could be probe development as well in sort of liquid reagents as well too. So yeah, I guess it is quite interesting that you're working with people all the way across the companies.
And customers
and having
as
to
well.
collaborate, and your customers, of course. Yeah, and feedback in. You are kind of the voice of the customer, would you say?
Yeah, absolutely. So everything that we learn speaking to scientists and researchers is ultimately fed back into our development team to guide new product development. That's not unique to our company. Every company generally works like this. So yeah, we're the kind of external voice of the company that goes out and speaks to real life people and learn what the real life problems are and feed that into our development pipeline to make better products for everyone. So yes, yeah, absolutely, we're the kind of where most of the voice of customer comes from.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic, Joel. Well, we'll come back to you, Joel, when we come in and to our panel conversation, where we sort of talk a bit more about the general topics in commercial areas. But for now, thank you very much. And I would like to introduce Manoja Sivakumar. Now Manoj is somebody that I know quite well. He's somebody he's joined today kindly from our organisation at BMG Lab Tech. So we don't need such formal introductions, you and I, Manoja, but for the rest of the team, could you talk a little bit about who you are and what your role is within our organisation?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Catherine. Thank you for the opportunity, Elric and SRG. So I'm currently a senior application scientist at BMG Lab Tech. So work with Catherine. In my role, we sort of work with various teams, but I would describe the role as dynamic and impactful. Because I have a scientific background, it provides a solid platform or foundation for supporting our customers using our microplate readers with their applications and optimization. It gives me the opportunity to understand their work and also relate back to our company to produce scientific content where we can publish that on our website and for other users to also use in their own research. If they can access that, we sort of help the scientific community by giving back through the scientific content as well. The role actually allows engagement in a variety of activities, including technical support, so supporting customers with use of our microplate readers, with optimizing their assays, with creation of new assays, so really working with them and producing the data that they would like to use for papers, so from start to end, really. And we also get involved with scientific content creation. That could be internally with our company, or externally with our customers through various pharma companies, as well as academia or academics as well. We also have a very cross-functional collaboration. So especially my team, we work very closely with our sales team. So through that could be through demos, a new lead. We sort of help sales team understand the scientific background of a sale, and sort of get involved to make that into a succession. So giving back the scientists what they really need from our products. We also collaborate with marketing team as well in producing content for whether that's for conferences, poster production, talks in conferences, as well as webinars and things like that. So yeah, it's a variety of different activities that we get involved as an application scientist.
Yeah, no, there is a good deal of variety in the role, that's for sure. How have your past experiences, if you like, or your past experience sort of readied you to take on this kind of role?
So my past experience has, as you know, Catherine, has been just purely academia. So I did my biomedical sciences at University of Manchester, and then I moved on to do immunology at Imperial College London, an MSc in immunology. And after that, I started a PhD, which combined immunology and microbiology at the Pirbright Institute, as well as St. George's University of London. While I was doing my PhD, it was pretty clear for me that I did not want to spend time in the lab. After my PhD, I didn't want to do the long hours that the normal postdoc comes with. I didn't want to apply for jobs every 2 to 3 years. I wanted a little bit more stability and financial commitment, I guess, with work. And from there, I was thinking what to go into, and then that led me to become an application scientist straight from a PhD. And I haven't looked back. I've been in it since I finished my PhD, which is about 6 years ago now. And yeah, I don't think I'll go back to academia. I love science, I love research. But I think the job that I do now gives me satisfaction in both. It's commercial, but also I get involved with the science, which is not my own project, but with other people's project to provide support in that, which I think is quite satisfying.
Yeah, I mean, do you see a lot of collaboration in your role in a similar way to Joel does, I guess, in terms of working with customers and other team members? Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, sure. It's very much what Joel said. So yeah, we get involved with customers, their projects. We really understand what customers do, understand their scientific needs and why certain assays needs to be carried out. And then we sort of support them from, coming up with the protocol setup, achieving that data. It is very collaborative. And when we talk to customers also, they see us as people that's there to help them achieve what they want to achieve. So we don't come across as trying to sell anything in some way. It's great because they do see us with as a person with scientific knowledge who's there to support their science, and usually they're willing to talk to us and share their experience and let us in almost in their project and sort of to some extent hold their hands when it comes to our techniques or our readers to support them to achieve what they want to do, which is pretty much satisfying in itself. I do enjoy doing that side of the job.
Yeah, so I was going to ask you about the things that you, I guess, enjoy the most. Also interesting to know whether you saw any challenges when you first got into the role, or areas that you needed to train on once you came into the role.
Yeah, so when I did the transition, obviously I, like many people that could be attending today's thing, and probably the same thing, is I didn't realize there was a whole commercial side to science. All I knew was academia. So when I did my research and looked into it after my PhD, I realized there's a variety of roles out there for people with science background. And the initial, I would say, the setback or the challenge that I found when I started my role was having a heavy academic background or scientific background. Doing a PhD, you come with like a niche background in a certain topic, but then coming into a role like this, you need to understand variety of science, technology, the technologies, the engineering side of things, or the sales side of things, the actual commercial side of things. So I had to go from sort of scratch to learn the sales aspects or the engineering aspects of certain technologies that we provide as BMG Lab Tech. That was the initial challenging, but like any role, you need to, start somewhere and you need to pick up things. And I felt like doing courses, we did courses on sales, and presentation skills, time management, all of that helped me do my day-to-day job. I always feel like I know lab, I know how to prepare, how to run experiments and things like that, but what I didn't have when I started this role was the commercial skills that's needed for whether that's for sales or understanding the techniques, which I thought it's still stimulating. When I started my role, I found that I was stimulated. I was learning things. I wasn't just doing the same thing every day. Still in the field of science, which is which is what I enjoy, I guess.
Yeah, great stuff, Manoj. Thank you. A question that came in specific for you, but again, I'd be quite keen later to pose this to the panel in terms of how, with hybrid working and things now, working from home, how often do you visit customers face to face, or is it more remote tech support that you do? That was a question from one of our attendees. Thank you.
Sure.
Just to remind people again, use the Q&A to ask any questions. Perfect. Sorry.
No, it's very much hybrid. So I'm on site 2 to 3 days a week, and it's never, every week's different. It's not the same. So I'm not going to lie, I'm not out 4 to 5 days a week. It can happen, but I am in charge of my own calendar, so I can plan my days according to my week. I actually enjoy going out to see customers as well. Seeing people face to face, creating that connection, having those scientific conversations. So it is very much hybrid. We do things at home, we do trainings at home through Teams, but when things needs to be done in person, when we need to, access the lab, be at customer side, we do that as well. So it's a good mix of both.
Okay, that's great. Thank you so much, Manoj. We'll invite you back with everybody as we go on to the panel discussion, but I'd like to introduce now Sybil Wong. to the floor, if that's okay.
Yeah.
It's so awful that I can't see everybody, Sybil, and I'm smiling away and nodding my head very, very, very much as we go through this. It's great to speak with you, actually. So far, and most of the panelists, including myself, have worked more on sales organisations, on the commercial sense. And I know you yourself have done that, and you've had quite a varied background also in academia and startups and biotech. So it'd be really great to hear a little bit about your journey, and also to understand what a partnering role, what that means in the commercial sense, and how that would apply. So over to you.
Absolutely. Well, I've had quite a varied career, as you say. I left my PhD and went straight into the world of startups. And for the last 10 years or so, I've been working for a number of different startups based in the UK, all servicing the life sciences research industry, and mostly with a software slant on it too. So it's been really fun. It's definitely a lot of learning every single day. And it comes from the fact that the products that we are trying to, and the services that we're bringing to the market are all new to everyone, including ourselves. You know, we're trying to create a niche and find a need for better solutions for making research faster, whether that's with software or with better tools or whatever it is. And so we're learning with the customer at the same time, what the right solution is. And I think that kind of comes to the heart of partnering. Indeed, I started off with some very sort of traditional business development type roles where, you have a standard product and then you're going out to find the right customers that match. And, you're trying to build up a funnel or a pipeline of people that might be interested in the product. And then, trying to shepherd everyone through to understanding their needs and whether there's a good match for working with your company. But beyond that, with partnering, you're trying to often create a situation where neither company has considered this way of working with each other before. But once you start talking to them and really getting to understand their corporate goals, if you will, or, at the core of what they're doing, their strategic aims for not just this year, but maybe in the next 2 to 3 years, if you can find alignment in the business strategy, that's where you can find an opportunity for partnering. And I think in some other job descriptions, you might see things like alliance management or strategic partnerships, that sort of stuff. And I think especially on a startup sense, it's super creative. We're coming to the market with new products and new ideas for how things can be done differently. And we're looking for partners who are open to exploring that, thinking about how, the service or the product that we are providing can be applied not only in a single case for a very specific R&D project, but rather at an enterprise level, if you will, or thinking about how more people from their organization on both sides can benefit from the interaction. So pause there because that sounds quite abstract.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's finding, I guess, those mutually beneficial areas where two companies can come together. But I'm interested then in how do you leverage, your past experience? Like, why is your background so important to that? And how does that play out in what you do, Sybil?
Yeah, absolutely.
Today?
I think one of the things is that, if you work in commercial and life sciences, you'll find that everyone around you is still a scientist. That hasn't changed. A lot of us have obviously moved from academia into more commercial or operational roles.
Kind of business world, isn't it? Yeah.
And also, sorry, go ahead.
No, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
I was just going to say that in the end, you find that in these conversations, and obviously you have to think about commercial and legal and IP, and you have to think about all the pragmatic things, but really the heart of the conversation is often, how can we do better science? And coming from that perspective, the scientific background is super critical. And I think it's important for both sides to feel that everyone around the table has at its heart, a good understanding and a good grounding of the scientific opportunity that is there. And then you layer on the more pragmatic parts, like contracting and pricing and things like that. But I think that's where the scientific background is truly valuable, and really everyone who's at this webinar, that's a unique thing that you bring to the table, regardless of what you've experienced before.
Yeah, just out of interest then, because obviously those must have been a lot of new skills that you didn't have before, Sybil. So
Yes.
what was the sort of training process like of getting that? How much was kind of expected of you coming in, and how much was training given?
Well, I absolutely went into the deep end from the first job. So I joined a company of 2 people. So it was very much learning on the job. And I think it depends on your outlook on life. I have very much been training on the job throughout, and frankly, learning from the people I work with, learning from the more senior counterparts of other companies we've collaborated with, learning from internally. The startups, I've worked with are naturally relatively early stage and possibly less experienced, but we also often have the opportunity to work with very senior members from other firms who we either hire or contract or sit on our board. And there's opportunities to learn from everyone all around you. And I think, I think it's obviously a maxim in business development, but listening more and speaking less is always a good way forward.
Yeah, also, well, a great skill in a commercial setting for sure. You've had a specific question come through. Thank you very much, Alex Powell. Hello, Sybil. What advice would you give to someone currently working in research but who is curious to transition into a role like alliance management? And what would be some good entry-level roles to pursue if this line of work is of interest?
Yeah, I think with alliance management, I find that a lot of people will want to see past experience. And I think this is across the board for a lot of the commercial roles, they'll often refer to past experience. But I think you have to be creative with the experience that you've had. I think everyone who's worked in research, academic or otherwise, you have done that job, trying to get people to pull together against a research goal and trying to find the resources and work out who all the stakeholders are, how to get the funding, where the funding is coming from, and therefore what the reporting looks like, and how to make sure that you've kind of covered all your bases and done more. All of these things are things that you will have done and touched upon in your research career. So I think being able to frame that for the people talking to you and to show them that you understand the transferable parts of what you've been doing, I think will help. And I'm sure everyone's heard this before. If there's someone on LinkedIn that you feel has the job title that you want next, I think be very open. Tell them that you're looking for this, and you might send 10 messages and 9 of them won't reply, but there might be one person who's willing to spend 20 minutes with you, telling you how they got into that role and how they managed to transition. And I think keeping that open minded and trying to learn from everyone will make it slightly easier. But everything will have a certain level of difficulty to it.
Yeah, I totally get that. And I think people's experiences can be so different. So reaching out to the community and trying to understand about different roles is going to be really important for people to consider. And a great suggestion there, Sybil. What's the best thing about what you do you think?
Well, I think for me, I love the multidisciplinarity of what I do. I work across everything from legal all the way down to working on the science. Now, obviously, I'm not the technical expert in the room because there will always be more experienced and more sort of domain specialists in the room when we're hashing out projects. But being the sort of the broad communicator between all of these different worlds is what I feel I've really enjoyed and also hopefully quite good at.
I'm sure that is the case, and that's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that information, Sybil. Like I've said to the others, we'll come back as a group shortly, but I have one more panelist to introduce you all to, and that is Eligio Linetti. So if Eligio can come onto screen, that would be wonderful.
Yeah. Absolutely. Hello, Catherine.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Eligio. Yeah, I guess a bit similarly to the others, you're joining us as in a business development role, again, more within the commercial space. It'd be really great if you could give some life to that and give us some insight into what's expected in that type of role, and maybe talk a little bit about the journey that you've taken to get to where you are today. That'd be wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. And thank you for inviting me. So yeah, currently I'm working for Beckman Culture Life Science as a business development manager. What does it mean? I'm obviously focusing on the revenue, on the growth of the company. So that means we are obviously focusing on our customer. We're trying to talk with our customers as much as possible. That's the most important thing, really trying to understand what is the customer job, what is the customer has to be doing in the lab. Obviously, Beckman Culture Life Science is a laboratory instrument and reagents company, so we develop and sell those kind of solution to scientists in the lab, mainly to biopharma, pharmaceutical company working in the lab. So we really try to talk with scientists every day, trying to understand exactly what are they doing. So I personally focus on the bioprocessing area. So an industry that is focusing on the development on novel therapeutics, mainly in my case, monoclonal antibody. So it's obviously a really complex job that goes from discovery and the development and manufacturing of those complex therapy. And then every customer working in a different department will have different needs. So different kind of cell model, for example, different kind of obviously analytical solution that they need. So it's really understanding what they do on a daily basis, what are the main pains that they experience, and how we can solve, we can really try to facilitate their job. So
yeah, so great importance there on being able to relate, I guess, in those scenarios and really understand those pain points for the customers. So I guess communication of that, and what are the most important attributes, do you think, in your role that you need to have in place to be a good business development manager?
Yeah, I believe, having a good understanding of the science behind is crucial. You need to understand exactly what the customer is doing, what kind of analytical solution, what kind, again, of molecular assay they are performing, they are developing. So a good understanding of the science is important. Doesn't mean that you need to have a PhD, not necessarily, but you need to have a decent understanding of the problem that you're trying to fix. And second is really the interest and to talk with people. So that's one of the reasons why also I left the lab, because I love science, I love technology, but I also, as many other people say today, I love talking with people, going out there, traveling, visiting customer side. So you really have to have that desire to meet people, network with people, and be curious about what they do. So most of my day is really talking with customers, that is over Teams, Zoom, so digital calls, or really visiting them on site. So I believe, the two important elements are really the scientific understanding, obviously if you're working in a high-tech company, and the interest in what the customer is doing, and talking with those customers, with those people.
Yeah, being able to relate is definitely important, and thanks for sharing a bit as well about how you're actively doing that as well, because I think hybrid working is becoming a bigger and bigger part of everything that we do in terms of getting access to people. When I look through what you've done, Eligio, I can also see that you've taken sort of business management training along the way. I'm wondering, some people might say, is it essential to have, business qualifications as well as science qualifications? I mean, what would you say to somebody asking that kind of question? Do you feel it's important, or how has that training helped you, I guess?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I recently finalized a master in business leadership and management. So that was done at the University of Dublin, University College Dublin. And it kind of came a bit, you know, I was not really looking for it, but in the job that I took, it was part of the package that this business training was coming with the job, because it was really a transition job, partially still in the lab, partially facing customer. So everything started there. It was coming with the job that I took, and then I developed that. It was an initial a diploma, and then it developed in three diplomas, gave me this master. So this master in business definitely is helping me to put things in perspective. So really, it's giving me a theoretical understanding, background of the commercial world. So it was divided in business development, strategy, and finance. So definitely it was great. It helped me a lot in progressing and moving. However, I was basically having my job before this master arrived and was finalized. I would have continued my career, I think, you know, more or less, at least until now, in the same way. So I'm sure it's going to help. It is helping, but it's not a must in any way. I think with a PhD, or even with a not even with a PhD, with a understanding, a master in science, you can really grow in a commercial organization. So really helpful, but not a must.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen we've had a few questions actually come in from people without PhDs, and we'll put this to the panel a bit later on. But I myself didn't go that route in the end, and not having a PhD doesn't prohibit you from entering into these kinds of commercial careers. I think so much is about drive and scientific curiosity sometimes, and in how you can make up for things, especially in scientific sales potentially as well. I think that there's a good avenue there. You had a question specifically for you, Eligio, and that is around what experience is required to start a career as a business development manager, especially if you come from a lab-based role and wanting to complete a complete career change. So maybe somebody who's been working in the lab for a while and looking to do something different. What was your path into doing this, I guess? You know, how did you prepare yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So I personally did my PhD in a startup. So I think so it was already a company. Right after that, I joined another startup, also developing an analytical solution. This was Valitacell in Dublin, Ireland. I think the startup environment, it's great. I personally love it because it gives you the opportunity to really space and explore many different roles at the same time. You know, working in a startup, you have to be ready to wear many different hats, and it's essential that you're going to touch on different points. So, you know, initially in my role as a business development manager at Valitacell, I was working in marketing, I was working in sales, I was working as a tech support. I was doing a little bit of everything, really, all the way from the lab to the tech support and customer support. So that's a great way, I believe, to explore many different careers in the commercial space. And maybe after you can, once you know a little bit better about the different options, while you have experienced a little bit the different options, you can decide to direct yourself in one of these avenues. And in relation to how to get a business development role, I think, you know, it depends also a lot from the company. Business development, sales are obviously really strictly connected, and often enough they are even used interchangeably. So it's easy enough to get, I think, a account manager position or a sales rep position straight out of the PhD or straight out of a master. Well, basically with a technical understanding of the product you want to sell, you can apply for this position. You know, depending what they're looking for, they can definitely already hire somebody with no previous experience in sales. So it's really the interest, the motivation of doing this jump, and persistence. Keep applying, keep talking with people, because, you know, the jump, it can be challenging, but once you've done the jump, I think things are much easier.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. Thank you so much, Eligio. That feels like a good point, actually. I want to expand a bit on that question, but maybe bring all the panel back together. So are we able to get everybody back on screen? Because quite interested to get everybody's perspectives here. Firstly, what sort of things, there's one question here. So obviously lots of lab roles outside of the lab seem to ask for experience a lab scientist may not have. How can we make our applications stand out and seem more desirable? I'll come to everybody on the panel to sort of answer that, but before we do, I'm quite interested, Philippa, to get your thoughts on what do you think employers are looking for from the people that you speak to, just out of interest.
Yeah, sure. I think when it comes to commercial roles in our industry, I mean, it's very much a game of two halves. You have to have a scientific background, that certainly helps, and that key interest in science. And depending on the role that you apply for, it may be sort of very niche skills in that field in terms of the technical side. But I think it's really focusing on the competencies. That is such a key part when you're applying for commercial roles. When I think back to sort of, it varies job by job, but generally what our customers are sort of asking us for is, I'd say P1 is communication, both on a written and verbal basis. And I think what really underpins the competency of communication is that ability to translate the science, whether you're talking to another scientific expert or perhaps talking to a customer that doesn't have a scientific background, that ability to really communicate. Just sort of going through these quickly, I'd say definitely relationship building. It is critical. You want to create those effective partnerships, listen to your customers, understand their challenges, and work with them to find effective solutions, which kind of lends itself to that kind of strategic problem solving, having the ability to work with customers, understand the problems, and then create the effective solution. One that we're seeing more recently is that real strong ability to network, not just within your immediate company, but really putting yourself out there, whether that's going to networking events, which, by the way, is a big tip for everyone listening. Go to networking events, even as candidates, because you'll be surprised just how much you learn and the contacts you could make. But making sure you create a good network across both industry, but also academia. And then the final two, I'd say definitely being well organised. I think that comes with the territory, particularly when you're working with multiple customers. And I think finally, definitely an emerging trend is really demonstrating that ability to want to keep learning. I think when you're in a commercial role, we all have a duty of care to understand not only what the advancements in science, but what's happening with IP management. What does the funding landscape look like? And I think it's so important in commercial roles that you do keep up to speed with all of the changes. But they would be my sort of top recommendations.
I think that's great, Philippa. And as an employer, I mean, I resonate with everything. Again, so disappointed people can't see me nodding along and smiling away, because those are all the things that we would kind of look for in individuals, because so much it's about fit. And these are often customer facing roles where you've got to be able to form those great relationships. And it is that translation of science where you're trying to get across themes in a way that you need to be relatable to the people that you're working with, and that lifelong learning. And I do feel that a strong scientific background kind of readies you for that, all the research and things that you do. Quite keen then to ask some of the others on the panel. I don't know, just maybe say if you want to answer on this, as to what other things do you think people can do to make themselves stand out? Anybody like to step in on that one?
I can maybe jump in a little bit. I think when especially we're looking for commercial team members in startups, we're looking for curiosity more than anything, and also the drive to kind of dig deeper into what we do as a company, and out of the normal what you can get on the website. And that sometimes requires digging deeper with us while you're talking to us, but also being able to do some research on the side. And if you go and look at the Basecamp research website, you'll see that we're doing metagenomic sequencing. We're trying to build a foundational data set for AI and hopefully build better tools for designing enzymes and therapeutics. And that sounds relatively broad, and if you took any one section of that and really deeply looked into that and found something really interesting that you felt, oh, I found this and I thought it might be relevant for you, and drop it into an email, or even just like a recent newspaper, a news item, and you're like, oh, I saw this news come through, I thought it would be relevant for you. I think it shows just that extra step. And it, I'm not saying that it needs to take hours, but it's similar also role playing how you would interact with a customer. A lot of the times when we're doing business development, we're not always selling and we're not always closing. But in order to maintain that relationship with the customer, we sometimes think, oh, this is an interesting thing that I'd like to send to Catherine, and then this would be something that might help her with something. And it's kind of showing a little bit of that, going that extra step might help. Doesn't change. If you don't have the core competencies, to Philippa's points, that won't necessarily change the fact. But if you're trying to stand out from the crowd and you think you're a perfect fit for that role, I think that could be just a spark.
Yeah. I would actually add to that as well from my own experience. When I first decided to take the leap, I actually did some shadowing of somebody in this type of role. I felt that it made me more, when I was going to interviews at first, people almost looked at me as like, are you sure you want to leave the lab or you want to come into this kind of career? You've been working in this lab space. And I was like, no, I really know what I want to do. So I think not having commercial or not having been customer facing previously was maybe a barrier that I felt at the time. And having that kind of shadowing experience that I could relate to in my interview to say, look, I've been out, I've seen what's involved with this, and it's actually quite good. I really loved it. Was a great standing point. Would anyone like to comment on that at all, or has had similar experiences?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of scientists forget that they know more than just wet lab and research. I think there's a lot
Absolutely.
of transferable skills that we pick up during PhD or during a degree. And I think when I did my application, I only ever did one, I do have to admit, is that it was just not putting down every method I knew in the lab, but actually thinking back about my 4 years in the lab and seeing what have I learned in this process that could help me make that move to commercial role. That was problem solving. Every day was a challenge in the lab, and I feel like for a commercial role that is pretty much bang on. You need that problem solving skills, and then also communication skills during your PhD or during your degree. You end up doing a lot of presentations at seminars, at conferences. You write a thesis, you write your master's projects up. So written and verbal communication is important, like with networking, whether that's writing a scientific content for the company you're applying for. So all of that sort of skills that comes with it, we have to think beyond just being in the lab. What else is there that I can take from this experience when applying for commercial roles, I think.
Yeah, no, that's great. I really, that's absolutely true. Manoj, has anybody else got anything to come in on there? I'm just conscious of time, but anybody else like to add to that? Joel, what's your experience been?
So I would advise, if there's a company that you really want to go and work for, reaching out to one of the employees. So you, for example, at the moment at Biotechny, we have summer studentships that we're advertising at the moment. If those are of interest, reach out to someone from the company and find out a bit more about it. It shows a bit of initiative. It shows that you're inquisitive and curious to learn more about the company and the role. I think things like that can go quite a long way. If there's a particular company that you're interested in working in, or a particular role within that company, I think those sorts of things can really pay dividends down the end. So that would be my additional comments on that.
Yeah, no, it's wonderful. Alicia, have you got anything to add there?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I agree with everything was just said, but I think it's a lot also about passion and motivation. So, I mean, I used to really have, for example, during my bachelor and master, I was really focusing and obsessed with genetics. And then, I was looking around everything about the latest trend in genetics, NGS and so on. And eventually I ended up, so I was really, looking at companies in that space and trying to understand, okay, which company is the best company in this space, which company should I target? And then I ended up doing a PhD in eye content microscopy. And then I got really passionate about microscopy. And then the next step was, okay, which is the best microscopy company or imaging company? So it's really where your motivation and drive brings you, and focus on that, because the employer will see your motivation, your passion for that, and that's I think a critical element.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic, Elijah. I agree. And I think where a lot of the skill sets Philippa alluded to there are really around interpersonal skills and showing that passion for science, because you have to translate that to the people you're working with. I think all of these tips and hints that are coming from you guys are really fantastic nuggets of advice that anybody should take forward, I think. Really fantastic. We've had lots of questions really about people wanting to sort of shape their career path towards things and knowing. I'd like to finish up. I know we're on time, but I think we've got maybe 1 or 2 minutes here. I'd just like to finish by talking a bit about career progression and what sort of pathways people can take or move on. Philippa, can I come to you on that and sort of see, do you see people moving from one sort of commercial role into another, or what does progression really look like for candidates when you're dealing with them?
Yeah, I mean, I guess just very quickly, the key point I do want to make is we've talked a lot today about leaving the lab. And I always say to candidates, if you've got a real interest in commercial roles, that's great. But don't, when you leave the lab, that isn't forever. And if it doesn't work out, you can always go back to the lab. And I think that's a really important point to emphasize today, because it's almost like it's this final, I've left the lab. And actually, I've seen a lot of candidates go back and forth, and that's actually served them very well. But in terms of career progression, I guess it depends on the different pathways, and I'm conscious of time. But generally what we see is people will take that step out, they'll start to work with customers, and they'll start to gain that experience and gain that insight. And it might be that they then go more along that business development route, and then can obviously progress upwards into a more senior role, perhaps with more of a global focus. Or we tend to see perhaps people with more of the PhD backgrounds will go more down that field application scientist route and then start to become a product expert, where probably there is a stronger emphasis on the technical element. And again, they can sort of progress upwards. Equally, we see some people go into commercial roles and they end up going off to start their own startup. Why not? I think it's really important that you don't, there's no limit to this. There's no end to this. People can take that ambition and that passion that we've spoken about as far as they want to. And we've seen many of our candidates we've worked with early in their career who now are co-founders of some fantastic startups. So I would say there's no limit. And I think, I would encourage people to go for it. And if it doesn't work out, you can always go back to the laboratory.
Yeah, and of course, Joel's talked today as well about roles that also are commercial roles, but are also still lab-based. So you don't have to leave that sort of element of the lab work altogether.
I did a day in the lab on Monday, actually. So
fantastic, Joel. Even I can use the pipette still. I tell you now, I love an opportunity to get into the lab, even after 20 years. It's been really wonderful. I could really talk all day to everyone. We've had some fantastic questions coming in. Hopefully we'll be able to, as the panel, come back and answer some of those offline. And of course, we'll share some of those detailed questionnaires with you all. Thank you so much for attending. Thanks to all our panelists that have shared their experiences today. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much, and goodbye.